Oh,
Yes.
now we are.
Oh, okay. All right. So I would like to thank everyone to welcome the meeting today. This is the 6th Moving Forward RBE online meeting, and the topic today will be applied mechanization and workforce. Our presenter will be Andrew Lam. He's a zeitgeist movement activist from the United States. So there will be 2 sections today, as usual. The first section will be presentation, and the second section will be the discussion section where we can ask and discuss. So because Andrew's presentation is going to be really long, so I would like to hand over the meeting to Andrew. Andrew, you're meeting yourself.
I figured I would do that at some point. Thank you all for being here, and I'm very excited to be presenting for you. As Stephanie already mentioned, my name is Andrew Lam. You can call me Drew for short if you like. This presentation about applied mechanization and the workforce, I would imagine is probably going to run about 30 or so minutes. It may be a little shorter, but just a brief introduction about myself, just for the sake of the recording. I've been a member of the Zeitgeist movement, an active member, I would say, since March of 2015. And since then, I've begun trying to connect with as many advocates of a resource-based economy and allies of those ideas as possible. In 2016, I began my pursuit of an associate's degree in social science, and afterwards I definitely plan on continuing, possibly in law, economics, public policy, and I have my eyes set on a certificate to get sustainable public policy as well. So other than that, I'm obsessed with humanities, and that's kind of what's led me to create this presentation for you this evening. So I know that the majority of you all are well aware of the problems we face as a species. Like, there's no doubt about that. This gives individuals like ourselves no shortage of fun, challenging, and time-consuming puzzles to unbox and to try to solve. So since you're here and you're listening to me, I know that you're eager to want to make the world a better place, and I'm here to give you some tools that may assist you in conversation with people who may not necessarily understand how possible a resource-based economy is based on modern-day trends. So let me see here. I gotta get to the thing where it says screen share. So I'm just going to open up my presentation now. I have a foreword still before I really begin. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Do you guys see that? I got a message that says I'm disabled from sharing my screen.
No, I don't see it.
Stephanie.
Hey, what happened?
It says that I do not have, when I hit share, it says it's disabled.
So at the bottom, Stephanie, it says share screen. Allow other participants to share screen at the bottom.
Yep. 1 moment. How about this? Try it.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so now I got a full screen here. Slideshow from beginning. Oh, hey, I was like showing one of the last ones. Okay, so let me move my little thing out here. So when it comes to this stuff, I can't help but get really excited. In case anybody notices a little bit of a tremble in my voice here. I, for one, was so enthralled and wishing nothing less but to make a huge impact on the way things were going, that I began reading, studying, watching, eating, sleeping, breathing, anything resource-based economy. And I'm always willing to learn more. That's why I'm here, and I love this group because we share so much things that I may not be well aware of. And So I'm going to share with you what I've been well-versed with in my studies, or what I'd like to think I'm well-versed in. It runs deeper than my initial interest now than, resource-based economy, as my professional studies entail. But the vast majority of the sources that I'm going to be using here are from well-funded institutions. They may not necessarily have a good reputation for people like ourselves, but nonetheless are very well-funded and reviewed. They come from institutions like the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, the Bureau of Economic, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and so on and so forth. They use many other government institutions to help bring up this information. So this data is going to be one gadget in that Swiss Army knife, like I mentioned, and it'll definitely help you in conversation or debate if things start to become a little polarized. So here we go. So the objective totally of this work here is to show that our technological capacity has reached the point where it could potentially breach the last remaining safe haven, if you will, for employment. Additionally, some of the issues that are inherent to the economic framework that we currently inhabit will be put forward, and a thought experiment will be discussed regarding the possibility of embracing technological unemployment as a way to develop a route to an economic system that doesn't require cyclical consumption to operate. Please keep in mind that the majority of the data that I'm going to be sharing with you is statistical data pulled from the United States. I would love to go into researching data coming from the rest of the first world or even elsewhere, but since this was relevant to what I have the ability to affect to some degree, this is where my studies have led me. So there'll be three major points here. What do I click to get? Okay, yeah. Well, there's the thesis for you that I just read out loud. But the preview of the main points here. First, I'm going to be describing to you the rise of mechanization and automation in the labor sectors, with the focus on the United States primarily, but there may be some spillover from other first world countries. The second, I'm going to examine and share with you data revealing the correlation between modern workforce employee psychology, and the pathology, meaning diseases that are correlated to it directly. The third topic, final topic, I'm going to be discussing expected outcomes between the clash of late-stage capitalism, which we inhabit now, and the rise of public awareness of the trends in technology. Also something not mentioned into that third point is public awareness of the root cause of disease, which I hope will become more apparent as time progresses. So, section 1, allow me to first discuss what I mean when I say labor sector or employment sector. I may refer to it as that as well. While there are a huge number of specific subsectors in the economy and the workforce, I'm going to be using macro terms here to try to help give something of an encompassing view of the trends in these specific sectors. The three sectors I'll be discussing is agriculture. The bottom left picture, you'll see is food cultivation primarily. The second sector, industrial, which is manufacturing. You'll see things like the prefabrication of automobiles and things of that nature, as far as what human hands are still touching, and automation hasn't taken from it. And the service sector, which is sales, customer service and support, restaurant staff, etc. Jobs that tend to be less physical and more mental. So let's see here. Now here, this is a chart that I pulled from the internet here. This is a culmination of 3 separate studies to which I can provide the sources each for. But this is all three studies combined to give you a total outlook of the years 1840 to 2010 of the distribution of labor by these three sectors that I mentioned to you. The sectors began seeing a notable sector shift starting in the year 1840, which is why it starts here. And the advent and implementation of technology in the workplace was one of the leading factors in the decline in the agricultural sector's ability to maintain previously high levels of employment. As you can see, that around the 1840, almost 70% of the entire U.S. workforce was working in agriculture. That's where now it's somewhere around 2 to 4%, I believe. It kind of fluctuates a little bit now, in the current time. But so the agriculture sector has declined over the this past 170-year chart. Now, one may ask, there's people who try to come up and debunk data like this, and they say, well, due to globalism, you might see that imports have a huge impact on employment in sectors like this. Perhaps we're bringing in more crops from other countries, and that lessens the amount of jobs here because we've got a surplus of food. That is unfortunately not the case. I've taken this data from the World Bank, and there's the previous slides, same chart. And you can see from the year about 1965, food imports to 2015 have dropped pretty dramatically. I mean, we do not bring in food from other places. So there's really no huge correlation between the amount of food that we bring in from other countries versus the unemployment rate. So let's see here. Yeah, according to this chart, it's 6% of total imported goods, just to give you a more specific number. So moving forward here, this is the food production index in the United States from right before, like I say, 1960 to about maybe 2014, 2015. As you can see, the two are practically inverted. You see food production going through the roof. You also see, again, comparing it to the employment charts, employment's been going completely in the opposite direction. So this is almost entirely the result of mechanization and automation in the agricultural sector. I use mechanization, that's kind of important to say, to differentiate that, because automation is something that works almost independent of human hands. Mechanization is something like a combine that goes and plows a field. It may or may not still require a human driver, even though in the United States we actually use satellite-guided combines now, which is incredible. It's just a human programs it, and it goes and mows the whole field without really any human labor being involved whatsoever. That's incredible. So let's see. Let's see. According to, we'll just reference the distribution of the labor force by sector chart here while I'm here. As you can see, at around 1950, during I guess the World War II industrialization in the United States, that was kind of where the peak was, and for the industrial sector. It wasn't long after that it started to become stagnant, and around the year 2000, in the next chart I'm about to show you, it started to take a nosedive. This chart, since it's showing you three different sectors, the drop from the industrial sector's employment levels doesn't look quite as dramatic, but this is from the Federal Reserve Bank here, and as you can see, the red line indicates manufacturing as in employment spiking between the years 1940 and 1950, and seeing some rather strange patterns, but still on a general incline to year 1980, which was seen in the other chart. And around the year 2000, it just began to take a nosedive. The blue line actually here will show you the industrial production of the industrial production index, which means that the sector itself was still producing, a lot for the economy. So they're decoupling at about the year 2000. Again, this is also the key factor. The result of this is automation. There are, of course, some other outliers, or not outliers, I'm sorry. There are some other reasons why this occurred. We are bringing in a lot of import automobiles, but as far as our economy goes, it's still being affected by the mechanization and automation. I said automation, listen to me. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. Just to let you guys know, I think I see chat messages pop up. Just to keep this fluid, I'd like to make sure that, I'll come back to any questions you may have. I don't know if there are questions or not. But. Okay, so this poor, the sad sack here, it looks like he's about had it. I don't know, he's staring off into something. Maybe thinking about how much he hates his job. I would hate my job too if I was sitting with a stack of books and a laptop all the time. Oh wait, I'm in college. That's kind of what my desk looks like. I don't want to pan over here. If you saw the rest of my desk, then you'd probably think I was that guy. But anyways, so let's transition here into section 2. Now we kind of have a decent grasp on the trends in the labor sectors, the 3 major labor sectors in the United States over the span of like over 170 years. What can we say about the jobs that we're left with? Well, there is always a need for more research on the psychological state of the general workforce, but through the studies that I'm about to share with you, it seems to illustrate that the current framework is making a great deal of workers unhappy, and unhappiness is almost a root cause of a lot of problems that I'm going to be going into more detail. Excuse me. So we know that the economic system we currently inhabit has a wide range of detrimental psychological and physical effects that are inherent to the system, and we don't think that we can pluck them out. And we might be able to do some patchwork and make things better, but they're pretty much always going to be there. That's not, excuse me. That's not to say that the effects are limited to physical and psychological, but those are the ones I'm going to be discussing with you today. So a large percentage of the workforce in the United States, as I will show, is very dissatisfied with their current occupation. Well, I say very. There is some variance between studies. I'll be going over 2 with you to try to cross-reference and give a more solid type of data for you. We all understand how incredibly vexing and stressful having to submit to employment roles that we aren't necessarily aligned with can be. I wouldn't be happy if I was working at a McDonald's. It has nothing to do with me as a person, and I don't agree with any of it. But please keep that in mind when we're talking about these statistics. These statistics also seem to be in fluctuation, every year as new studies come in and new data kind of challenges the current data. And data can also be changed greatly based on very small details in the way data is gathered. So if there are statistics that disagree with me that you're aware of, please keep that as a side note, and we can discuss that another time, whether it be after the presentation is over, or you can message it to me and I'll look over it in my free time. I'm always willing to hear from those who have information that's contrary to, or complementary, as a matter of fact, to what I'm about to share. So to begin with, according to a study the 2014 edition of the Conference Board Job Satisfaction Survey. And for the 8 years prior to 2014, less than half of U.S. workers were satisfied with their jobs. In 2013, the percentage of workers satisfied with their jobs was an estimated 47.7%. Well below the historical level of 61.1% in 1987, increasing by a mere 0.4 percentage points from the previous year. Overall job satisfaction continues to improve from its lowest point, which was 42.6% in a year 2010, but it's at a disappointingly low pace. This basically means, in layman's terms, that that basically every other person you meet is highly dissatisfied with their place in the economic system. That's crazy, literally every other person or about. To this day, data via the data gathering source I'm quoting here, job satisfaction percentages of the total population still haven't exceeded 50%, but is ever so slightly improving. We can continue these fluctuations to continue, but they're probably going to hover around, I would say, 50% on average. So, as previously mentioned, and this is important, sometimes the outcome of a study can be manipulated or altered to better support a desired result. And that's the one flaw in statistics that you must be aware of. If a set of statistics agrees with a previously conceived notion you may have, it doesn't make it correct. That is very important to understand. And there's probably some room for debate in the statistics that I'm showing you today, but I've read over these over the past year, and I think they're pretty well sourced. This one was very interesting, though. Now I'll discuss how it actually has a lot more in common with the first statistics, even though the percentages suggest the opposite, and is the way they gathered their data. Now, I'm not going to say that the second study was carried out by people willingly attempting to dissuade the reader into thinking that like the previous mentioned study was wrong. I'm not going to say that was their objective, but here were the said results of the study published by the Society for Human Resource Management on April 18th, 2016, entitled 2016 Employment, Job Satisfaction, and Engagement, Revitalizing a Changed Workforce. Now, this study quoted that 88% of U.S. employees reported overall satisfaction with their current job, marking the highest level of satisfaction over the past decade. Now, overall satisfaction, the keyword's overall. When you have an intimate understanding of how people like these folks use words like that, that means they're trying to lump things together. And when you read into the finer details, you'll understand why the number seems a little larger than life. When one takes a closer look, you see that it is noted that 51% were reporting uncertainty. And you can check this on that chart there to the right. There's a screenshot that's been cut down so you can see where I'm quoting from. You can see that 51% were reporting uncertainty, claiming partial satisfaction, with only 37% of the workforce reporting that they were very satisfied. Now, if you consider somewhat satisfied as a positive notion, then you're left with record high levels of satisfaction. However, if you're like me and you think that uncertainty is not in the language of feeling secure or happy, or both, then that makes it 63% of the population that is dissatisfied or discontented with their current levels of employment. Even if you split the somewhat satisfied percentage in half and added each half to those considering themselves very satisfied and the other half to those very dissatisfied, then you are left with odds that are closer to the other study and other studies besides the one previously mentioned, where roughly 40% or more of the population that participated in the studies were still dissatisfied. So we're still looking at pretty high numbers. Even if it's 40%, that's 4 out of 10 people, or you divide that down a little bit, then you're getting sorry, wow, oh man, my brain just kind of fogged up. I'll just stick with the 4 out of 10 figure. I'm sure somebody else can quote the smaller fraction for me in the chat box. But to continue here. All right, let's see. Now, I'm going to move forward here a little bit. So overall happiness seems to be pretty low, even with some of the higher figures, the aforementioned higher figures. The average tends to complement those lower averages, or the higher averages of unhappiness. And there's a huge number of health risks being generated by these high levels of unhappiness, oftentimes completely out of the public arena of debate and discussion. It's not even something that is currently on the table. Those of you who are familiar, well, I'll say that, like Peter Joseph of the Zeitgeist Movement, and many people in the Venus Project discuss structural violence, and I'm not sure if everyone here is aware of that, but to give you a concise or shortened definition of what that means, is simply negative health and consequences of actions based on, say, what the economic system kind of reinforces. So if I got heart disease or something, which is something I'm going to be talking about because of high levels of stress because of my job, then that's may be considered a form of structural violence. So moving on. Here, this is a chart that I pulled from a pretty well-known and cited source. I don't know if you're all familiar with this, but let me give you a foreword here. Dissatisfaction contributes to unemployment in a high degree, and people often measure their self-worth according to normative cultural aspects that are often embodied in the socioeconomic system they were born and raised in. Now, I know that was kind of a word salad, but to help clarify what I mean there, you probably understand in the first world that if you're wearing say you're a woman and you have like a Prada bag, then everybody knows, oh, that's like a status symbol. Those things cost a lot of money. She must have a lot of money, and then that's kind of associated with like how well you're doing. Basically, that's kind of what I'm hitting at here. So the poorer you are, the lower you actually feel that you are as a human being. So many researchers understand this connection between the economy, the culture of that said region, and the behavior, and they've taken to study the way the economy affects human behavior. This chart was pulled from a study that Dr. Carlos Nort of the Department of Psychiatry, Psychotherapy, and Psychosomatics of the University of Zurich, Switzerland, headed to determine whether the financial crash of 2008 had any kind of impact on suicide rates. And the findings were as follows. In all of the world's regions that were in the study, relative risk of suicide associated with unemployment was elevated by about 20 to 30% during the study period. Overall, 41,148 suicides were associated with unemployment in 2007, and a little over 46,000 in the year 2009, after the recession had really started to take its toll, indicating almost 5,000 excess suicides since the economic crisis in 2008. Unemployment may not directly lead to suicide in some cases. However, this doesn't mean that those who remain unemployed aren't subject to the same degrees of the feelings of self-worth when you lose your job and things of that nature. So markets haven't historically been the most stable of economic models. That's not to say that there are other economic models that have been tried that have been stable either. Don't leave that part out. So to say that another market crash like the one that happened in 2008 isn't possible, or that it's not going to happen again, it's completely dishonest. It's probably going to happen again. Because we have an answer to this epidemic, folks like ourselves, suicide rates can be viewed as a systemic result and hence structural violence. I don't like giving non-thinking, amoral economic models, characteristics of a human, but I can say that the way that it is structured it's responsible for killing a lot of people. I kind of want to refrain from using the word that the economic system is somewhat of a murderer, but in this case, it kind of is. It reinforces those things. So I'm going to move forward here. I'm going to just kind of briefly touch on this. I know this data is a little old. It's 2007, and this data doesn't exceed 2011. And the data pulled from the American Heart Association, it was from 2009. But I wanted to make sure that the data that I was using for both of these was kind of closely correlated to give you a figure of how much money these types of things cost in a general time frame. Now that there has been a decrease in the amount of deaths due to heart disease, but there's always fluctuation, just like everything else. The CDC's results, they're estimated to have been around 61,000 deaths annually in the United States. Some estimates, depending on how the data is gathered, just like we were talking with our statistics, some estimates say upwards of 800,000 deaths caused by heart disease in the United States. And there's a staggering amount of money involved in these types of things, as you can see on the chart to the right. And in 2009, heart disease itself was responsible for direct and indirect spending of over $300 billion. That is a lot of money, and I could tell you if we solve problems that caused heart disease, stress being one of them, and let's all link that back to the unhappiness that our current economic system is generating, then we can correlate the two. The massive amount of spending that we're seeing to try to help people with these problems is a direct result of mostly, but not entirely, stress-induced. Of course, there's some other things in there too. I'm not going to try to blow this out of proportion. There are dietary habits that also contribute to these types of things, but stress is definitely not something to be disregarded. So, my little screen. I'm going to move on here. Here is that very blank slide that went missing. I was supposed to have some pictures and stuff in there but anyways, there are many, many more issues that we could dive into in regards to the things that our current economic model tends to perpetuate. But I just wanted to highlight the previous ones, the happiness and the heart disease, since they're less hidden and more notable, even if they aren't necessarily talked about in the mainstream media. Now, all of these things combined paint a fairly ugly picture, and don't get me wrong, I have my moments when I feel somewhat pessimistic, but our day and age has both its ugly side and a side of great promise and progression. We often have more solutions than we have problems, which is definitely true, and we have a problem implementing and applying technical solutions just because of the way that we're organized right now. We can improve upon that. Hopefully we will in the near future. So there's a powerful realization when one comes to connect the dots, if you will, between the aforementioned advance in labor human labor replacing mechanization and automation. So automation that replaces us in the workplace, and the current state of those living in the lowest and or unhealthiest of economic positions. It's powerful to see the two here. So here we are. I've pulled this data from an article from MIT. The uncoupling, as you can see, and this is overall U.S. productivity. This is like all sectors combined, I do believe. Excuse me. The uncoupling of overall productivity and job growth in the United States began around the year 2000. That probably sounds familiar, since it was a year that you saw a lot of decreasing in the industrial sector's employment rates. You see that right there on the chart. Can you guys actually see the mouse? Yeah, you guys, okay. You don't have to unmute or anything, just nod. But this chart kind of shows you that gray line underneath. See, the white's just the correlation, and to kind of help you understand the pattern. Right here, you see it just kind of breaks away. Employment starts to stagnate, and the productivity of the economy continues to move forward. So the gap between that has grown. The overall output in 2011 was roughly 4 times that of the output generated in the year 1960 here in the United States. And to quote the section here on the bottom, talking about US GDP per capita and household income, while the nation's total output has generally grown over the past 25 years, the median household income has been nearly stagnant, meaning the productivity has increased, the wealth of the country has, but not necessarily the wealth and care for those who primarily do all of the labor that hasn't been taken over by the automation that I previously mentioned. So we have 2 pressures. Now, of course, there are more than 2 pressures, but there are 2 that I'm going to generalize here for you that we're coming up against that we need to discuss. Both of these can help us understand that we can create a better economic position and an ethically superior tomorrow as compared to today. The first, there's the pressure of economic destabilization. And as seen from previous data, the cost of mechanization and automation has decreased pretty dramatically, which has made both the industrial and agricultural sectors' employment levels decrease fairly dramatically. Obviously, I mean, like, I may not have shown you, say, prices of the automation and mechanization, but the price trend is what made it available. When prices decreased, employment went down, and the mechanization and automation, I keep saying that, went up, which is, again, correlated. So it would take, people often forget that all it really would take is somewhere between 10 to 20% an unemployment rate to generate a destabilizing effect in the economy. So like when I myself talk to people about things like the resource-based economy, I don't necessarily have to convince them that, well, we've got to automate absolutely everything. Well, of course, that's the end goal. We would really like to see that occur, somewhere like up to 95% automation and everything else being just kind of maintenance of what we have to take care of ourselves with. But what you really have to do is point out that figure. 10 to 20% is all it takes. And we will see a market collapse. We don't want to see what happens when a full-blown collapse happens due to the automation or the unemployment caused by automation and mechanization. So that's the question. At what point will automation and mechanization become so affordable and efficient to use that it effectively generates a high enough level of unemployment to destabilize the economy? There are, of course, some solutions, I'll very briefly touch upon after this. But the second pressure moving forward there's the pressure of the ones generated by those lower tiers of the economy. What would happen if these people were subjected to, unemployment and all of the aforementioned predicted negative externalities, which is a market term for all those pesky poverty-induced issues? What if those externalities were to start manifesting? This time on a much larger scale. I mean, you think 10 to 20%, that's, 1 or 2 out of every 10 person that's on, that's unemployment. That's a very high level. That's 1 in 10 or 1 in 5. It doesn't take a powerful imagination to imagine, to understand the results of what would likely happen. I mean, it'd be akin to a science fiction dystopia. But not to harp on that, if we harness and utilize the exponentially increasing technology that we have now at our fingertips, coupled with our understanding that if we replace the monotonous jobs with a large number, the monotonous jobs with a large number, let me step back here. If we harness and utilize that exponentially increasing technology that we have at our fingertips, coupled with the understanding that we can replace the monotonous jobs that a large number of people are unhappy with automation, then we can free up more people to pursue things that actually make them happy, which could effectively end many of the epidemics. When we're talking about heart disease, it could definitely cut that back greatly, among many other things, obviously, as crime and all sorts of things. But that's a topic for another time. So I thought that was funny. I had to add that on there. There's been much talk about solutions over the past few decades. For instance, there's been much discussion on a guaranteed or unconditional basic income or universal basic income. It's got a couple nicknames. It's actually been, at least in the United States, something that has been talked about on both sides of the political aisle, if you will. That libertarian economist by the name, I think his last name was Friedman. Can't remember his first name off the top of my head. Bald fella. I'm not a big fan of him, but even he said that it might be a good idea in some cases. So we've seen it even from the far right that this might not be a terrible idea. So it's quite possible that if it were applied, we could see a balance emerge. This is one commonly discussed example, but I assure you, or you probably already know, there are no shortages of ideas that are awaiting experimentation. Judging by the trends, we are not only going to see a continual rise in the use of automation and hence the increase in productivity, but we are also going to see a diminishing of jobs. So we need to really start considering these options now. Perhaps we could venture into these ideas on another presentation. That's like what we could do to help foster in a transition. I would be more than happy. I'd be ecstatic, as a matter of fact, to participate in a presentation about possible transition ideas in the near future. So let's recap on what we've talked about here today. First, describe to you the rise of mechanization and automation in the labor sectors, with a focus on the first world countries, most of the data coming from the United States. Second, we examined data that reveals a correlation between employment, and modern workforce psychology, and some correlated pathology, diseases, and things of that nature. I wanted to go actually into a discussion about another discussion about suicide rates, but for another time perhaps. And third, I discussed with you all the expected outcomes of the clash between late-stage capitalism and the rise of public awareness of the trends and technology. And hopefully, again, in the near future, the public arena will have much more information about social causes of diseases. So this work in total has shown you that our technological capacity is at the point where it could potentially breach the service sector of employment, and that the economic system itself does generate these things inherently, these negative externalities, as they would call them. And technological unemployment may be a way to solve these problems to some degree. I'm not going to say it's the end-all, be-all, but we can hope and aim and experiment with these types of ideas as time pushes forward. So, perhaps it's more than wishful thinking to say that maybe one day nearly all labor will be automated and require so little of our time to maintain that we would happily share that tiny amount of work to maintain it with everybody and not demand a wage to do so. There's so much to discuss beyond this point, but this is where our thought experiment here in this presentation ends. Will you be an advocate of the use of mechanization to bring about this new era? One that could help bring about the betterment of those in the lowest places in society? Well, I know that I'm going to be, and may we may we do the right thing to alleviate the suffering on Earth and to help stem the tides of the many issues that arise to challenge us. This generation, in my personal opinion, is ready, and they're hungry for answers, and they're wanting solutions, and they're going to come up with them, and we're going to help come up with them. And it is up to you, and it is up to me. So let's do this. To end the presentation, I will quote the great late Jacques Fresco, a man that I know that all of us admire. If we are all genuinely concerned about the environment and our fellow human beings, and we want to end territorial disputes, war, crime, poverty, hunger, and the other problems that confront us today, the intelligent use of science and technology are the tools for which to achieve this new direction, one that will serve all people and not just a few. Thank you very much for everybody being here with me today. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Go out there and make a difference. I'll be more than happy to take any questions or converse here now. And I have 2 full pages of citations, of which, if anybody's interested, I'll be more than happy to copy and paste this into an email or a Facebook message or something for you guys. Thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation here.
Yep.
How do I turn off screen sharing?
At the bottom of your screen.
Bottom of my screen.
Yep.
Oh, there it is, the red button.
Yep.
Awesome. Alrighty, now there's 28 messages in the chat. If there are questions or comments, is there any way that you guys could take it easy on me and perhaps go into that second section? I'm sure, sorry, I didn't mean to cut Stephanie off. I'm sure she's gonna announce that part for me.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you, Andrew. It was a really well organized and informative presentation. I would say it was really fascinating. So now I'm going to bring all of us to section 2, which is a discussion part. So if any one of you have any comments and questions, please ask. Thank you. So who would like to give a go first?
Well, first of all, I would like to know if anybody here has any experience with coding or
No.
any kind of using machining to do tasks.
Well, I tend to relegate more of the coding thing to like website building. I'm not really familiar with any of it on any level. I can't speak for anybody else here, though. Are there any people here with us today, or perhaps people that know people, through the
Nicholas?
grapevine?
I'm illiterate when it comes to a lot of this digital stuff. I have made videos, so I've taught myself that, but coding, no. But I have 2 sons in their 20s, and they're really good at it. Yeah. So I pass along work down that chain.
All right. Well, I don't know. Run it by them.
Yeah.
Just see what they have to say about it. Coding. Did you have a specific thing in mind, Jeff? Like as far as the use of the coding?
Not exactly, because the way I see, I think like an architect and a mechanical engineer. So if I can get the machine together, the mechanisms together, I would just need someone to code it so they all work properly in the right order.
Okay. Yeah, I understand where you're going. Yeah. No. We'll try to see if we can't branch out through some of the organizations that are affiliated with this education group. I can try talking with folks in TZM, and there are probably some people in TVP. Perhaps we could use the World Summit may have some connections.
Andrew,
We'll expand and try to figure it out. Yeah.
if I can interrupt, I recently saw somebody on the Facebook group build a hybrid RBE, and he released a lot of open source material on that stuff. Also, PD, he recently tagged some of us in a post about all this free access, all this free source information. So you can check on my page, Jeff, and maybe if you get to that free access port, you can find someone that does the coding.
Awesome. Let's see. I'm trying to.
Jeff,
Open source would obviously be the best.
Sorry, one by one.
Jeff,
Nick.
about the coding, I have some experience either in my formation as an electronic engineer, and even in some job experiences. What coding are you talking about? Are you talking about assembly or another language program?
I think perhaps he was thinking about fabricating.
The main issue, I think, it's.
Sorry?
I thought he talked. He is aware he can do the mechanical things, but he faced the problem in the software coding or the electronics. Was that?
All right. Thank you for all your answers. I think we can probably bring this question in the group, like about the coding experience. If you all
maybe it's a good idea for Nuno and Jeff to hook up privately and work that out.
Yep. Yeah, I would say so. So, Eric, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Yep. So, if do you have any comments or questions, please do so. You're muting yourself. You have to unmute yourself first.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Concerning the coding, I recently went to school for welding, and a lot of the welding industry, it's starting to lose a lot of business because you need to be a welder and a coder to work in the machine factories for car automation. So coding for 3D printers and using 3D printers in welding, like a welding metal 3D printer, now it may be very expensive, but that would be the best, I'd imagine, way to do fabrication in those forms. And I was also thinking that the integration of Earthship building that they do in Taos, New Mexico with Michael Reynolds and Biotecture, creating buildings like that, or things of that nature to combine those two fields together, I think that would be very useful. So I would say coding for 3D printers would be a good focus.
Yep. Thank you for your answer. Do you have any other comments on the presentation itself, or any other questions to Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could agree with the trends of seeing how the service industries are taking a big boom while our trade skill industries are starting to go lackluster, and we are producing a lot more food, but due to the climate of what people think of how currency and food and how one should obtain sustenance through monetary value, I think if we worked more on some sustainable living or growing our own gardens and that nature, that would be a slow transition period. But I know a lot of folks that are interested in that, and there's definitely technologies I've seen where they use like a building that has a hydroponic system that can produce about an acre of food in a very small space. And if you use the combination of solar technology to power that hydroponic system and created a tower of such, you could produce several acres of food in 1 acre of space. So the solutions are out there. It's just finding the people that are working towards those. So a lot of it is just network connectivity and just the natural like mycology of human relations. So.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaway things from this presentation really is that the trends are like, think about it kind of like a climate for growing a crop, if you will. The climate in the United States for the economy, with the technological advances that we've made over the past 150 plus years, actually already lend themselves to being able to accomplish a lot of what a resource-based economy wants to try to do. The problem, like you said, is almost entirely cultural. It's a people don't know about it, or they unfortunately get flagged down by the loudmouth people who call it, communism and socialism. I mean, there are some elements of those two things you might see in there. And as our previous speaker, Charlotte, went through and did an amazing presentation that I highly recommend on the differences between the two, that will help you discuss like transition methods, her stuff, and then you use my stuff to try to talk about the end goal and how it's possible, how technology is pretty much just right there with it now.
Yeah, our solutions are right there for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up anybody else's speaking time, but specifically, we were talking about libertarians in that section of supporting some of these universal basic income forms.
Some of them, yeah, not a lot of them.
Not too many, but I also met personally Jill Stein, and she was really about that idea. But I think one thing that could be a unifying force would be tax allocation. If we can convince both sides of that aisle that if we can allocate our taxes personally so that I can have control and you can have control of your straw man account, our Social Security account, and we can decide where our money goes when we're taxed, I think that would make a major difference, and I think both sides of the aisle could unanimously agree on that.
Yeah, I've actually dabbled in theory myself, something I actually was hoping to discuss with our local economics professor, wink wink, Stephanie. She's in college for economics right now, and I was actually going to brainstorm with her on some of those ideas. I'm not necessarily one to say bartering or whatever you want to call it with the mega corporations is entirely ethical, but perhaps giving them an incentive to automate might help kind of create the domino effect we're looking for. And I had a couple interesting ideas I wanted to share with her, something that I probably won't do right here, about the way we may organize the way we tax corporate entities or businesses in order to incentivize that automation process. And I mean, that would be an interesting presentation or discussion all by itself. Maybe her and I, if we shared enough data and we could perhaps joint present something along those lines as far as economic theory goes.
Just a recommendation. I'd check out the Mises Institute. I forget. Mises. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a difficult time listening to the Mises crowd. I mean, it doesn't stop me or dissuade me from reading into it, but yeah, just they think the heart of the problem a lot of the times is government existing or playing a role at all, and really the evidence is quite the contrary. It's usually business interests that create these problems in the economy, and not. I mean, the government is a. You know, this is funny. I'll actually quote a Mises, a libertarian-esque person here for you, even though apparently lately he's been supporting Donald Trump, is Stefan Molyneux. Actually had a debate with Peter Joseph of the Zeitgeist movement where he completely failed to defend his own argument. He said, this is paraphrased, but a pretty close quote, the government is a gun in the room and the room is full of gangsters, and all these gangsters are trying to get the gun. Well, a classic argument from the right in the United States is guns don't kill people. The person who holds the gun kills people. Mm-hmm. So the government is nothing but an empty shell, and if it's populated with people, which if you take it doesn't even take a close look. You take a look at the people that are in the government, you see that they're in bed, or they are interchangeable people who walk in and out of the revolving door of business and government. I mean, look at Dick Cheney, you know, he just so happened to be the vice president at the time of 9/11. And okay, I'm not going to get into conspiracy, but he made hand over fist billions in the Iraq war and stuff. So it's just they're one and the same, and I actually think that it's been scarcity and business interest throughout time that has generated government. But you know, it's not to be dismissed. There are a lot of good things about government too, to be unbiased, frankly, that we shouldn't dismiss either. But just so we get to everybody else, I'd like to, you know, if you know, maybe you and I can have another conversation at another time. Yeah. Was there anybody else that wanted to talk about? Strictly, let's just keep it to the data that was in the presentation.
Charlotte? You want me to answer?
Yeah, you know me, Andrew. I'm taking notes during your thing. So I'm going to jump in on this universal basic income thing.
Yes.
Now, we have to be really clear on this. This is only a stopgap thing.
Absolutely.
And one of the points you made, Andrew, which I think really cannot be overemphasized, is that what the trends you see are an increase in productivity and a decrease in purchasing power. So if they give us money for nothing, they're printing artificial value so that we can give it back to them. And they're going to keep on producing. So this should be the clearest argument of any of them why money has to be taken out of the equation. No taxes, no money. I'm not finished yet because I want to get all my stuff out, and then you can remark.
Let me write that down as a note just so I know how to come back to it.
Okay.
But go ahead.
You also mentioned that the system kills. You only mentioned suicide, but one other very important point of killing that is inherent in not only capitalism but any kind of system in which there are some people with more possessions or more power than others is you have war. So a likely result, which I think you could have also added in the third section, a result of these conflicts going on is, looking for more markets, looking to redistribute, and usually the way that happens and takes care of unemployment and gives something for extra production is a war. And finally, about the pathology, you mentioned heart disease, And as a result of stress, now obviously that's true. You also mentioned diet. For any of you non-vegans who haven't seen What the Health yet, you could see that. But I was also thinking about addiction. One trend that is going on now in the United States is that there's basically an opioid addiction in a large part of the population. This is not coming because people are happy. They are not being sedated because their life is so good or because they have job satisfaction. I don't have any statistics for this. I'm just rambling because I can do that. So, and crime, of course. So those were some ideas that, you know, popped up while you were talking, which I think, you know, it just emphasizes the information. Bye, Jeff. That just emphasizes the truth of what you've been presenting, Andrew. So thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. I was very happy to be able to do this. If I could go back just to kind of respond to the three, I guess it was like three major points that you were making. There is something with the universal basic income that you have to be very skeptical about. Of course, you are absolutely right when you say that it has to be something like a stepping stone between two points. It has to be from here. It is a stepping stone to a future economy. And a lot of people don't necessarily agree on what the future economy is. I think all of us here kind of are on the same page. We all rooting for the same thing. As far as the way universal basic income goes, because I'm not an expert on UBI, but from what I understand, there is a big difference between quantitative easing, sorry, and redistribution. So if it was quantitative easing, that, or quantitative, however you say it, I'm sure everybody gets what I'm saying, that is printing more money for distribution into the economy, which reduces purchasing power because the money that is being freshly printed draws its value off of the money that is already in circulation. Redistribution would be using money that it already exists within the economy, and it isn't necessarily inflationary, even though, of course, with fractional reserve banking, you do have to worry about the money that's created every time a transaction occurs. There's a 10% held as a reserve every time money is deposited. So you'll still see some inflationary tendencies there. Of course, things like interests aren't going anywhere anytime soon, which is a shame because that's really the crime behind money. You're asking for money that doesn't even exist, which forces the hand of the people who print the money to some degree into creating more inflation, which devalues the money further. The second point you were talking about, like I did mention dietary as a issue. I wanted to create really a relatable sense in the section, discussing like psychological problems more, because I feel like at least to the people that I meet and talk to all of the times, it's just there's one commonality, and we're stressed. We're always stressed out. So really, I wasn't trying to omit that data with things like diet and so on. It was more just trying to bring up something that it was entirely relatable, especially to the citizens in the country that I live in. So, but yeah, I'd love to perhaps visit dietary choices. I am also, for everybody here, I'm also a vegan, and I have been for going on 3 years, and it has worked out great. I don't lord it over anybody, though. I tell you, definitely is a great idea for your health, and it has a lot of benefits to the environment. Something I would love to go into talking about at some point. I've studied that for God knows how many years. Studied it like for 2 years before I even became a vegan. So, because I didn't know if it was the right thing to do. But yeah, that's a big topic, and we'll talk about that another day.
Right. Thank you for your answer, Andrew. So, who have any comments or questions? Simon, please.
No, maybe not.
But still, I have some additions to make.
Sure.
Stephanie, you said Andrew said you are studying economics, so this is your topic. So I think universal basic income is, if you looked at the Facebook founder is supporting it, all the rich people are, of course, they are supporting as well. It is kind of a, you know, if you introduce universal basic income, the salaries of the minimum wage will go up because many people will choose to be jobless, and you know, from demand there are lots of, you know, that they don't demand that much, so their value will increase, and the minimum wage will go up. As the minimum wage goes up, what will happen? All those automation will increase because the cheap labor will not be there, so automation will increase. So what will happen then if the automation will increase? I think what is the plan? All those rich people that supporting UBI is to make people to give the minimum so they don't revolt. I think this is the basic thing, and I think this is I have some real stuff to believe in this, right? And this is a plan to make people, like you give them something so they don't die, they don't revolt, but this will, I think, delay the real revolution, the future. This will delay the future. I think it is not a good thing. I think it is better if we don't implement it. Some might say, yes, we can give you BE, right? Because this kind of free money, this they can see like this, but the general public will not be see like this as a socialist thing, as you know, giving, because they are not giving taxes. They are planning to give the minimum thing that you will not revolt against the system, so they can still make profits over you. They can still give you a little bit money and take all the percentages over you because they're the minority or the majority, so they can gain all the percentages over you. They will keep getting richer, and you will keep getting poorer without revolting. That's their plan. UBE is this plan for me. It is not about the transition to resource-based economy, nothing like this, because they don't want you to revolt. That's the basic plan.
Well, I'm sure Stephanie has something, but I just want to put this out there. I think the premise of a universal basic income, at least how it's been talked about being applied in the United States, is really it's really more or less like food and rent and some utilities. It doesn't allow you the benefits of, say, like the luxuries, like an automobile or anything of that nature. It's more or less just like a provision to make sure that basic food nutritional needs are met. And it's not really like you'll have a surplus, and I'm sure that the way that it was discussed, they're talking of making sure that the funds used for that would be monitored, and that anyone that uses those funds inappropriately would probably be helped.
Here's the thing. It will not be universal. They say universal, but if it will be applied, it will be for USA or America. That the powerful, that the military, if you can keep in your country, USA, if USA can keep the country voting for, not revolting, they can do anything because they have the military. They can silence all other countries. So I think what is going on in here is they will give USA UBI, Universal Basic Income. They will silence people, so they will not revolt. They will keep getting richer, and they will still keep bombing other countries because it is called universal. But I bet you will see it will not be universal. You see
Well,
that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I understand that.
This is the
That's
plan of the rich for me.
it's
As much as I can see. So I am strictly against universal basic income because it is not universal. It belongs to country to prevent revolt, to maybe lead more fascism, to make automation, although still the power will be in the corporations' hands, and they will still they don't want if we introduce UBE, and if it will be introduced, it will be introduced in USA, right? If they introduce it, it will delay the real progress.
well, see all right. So what I would hint at here, and I won't dwell on this long. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kind of like grandstand you, Stephanie. I know the question was more poised to you, but no, there is an important thing that we have to consider. So if we continue on the trend of decreasing the amount of jobs that are being created, then you're going to have to find something to stop the people who do not have any skills from starving to death, doing terrible things. You're going to see an increase in violence and crime and all of those things. And all of the health issues that I mentioned, you're going to see an increase in that if there isn't some kind of provision made for those people if they're displaced by technology. So the UBI, and I mean, to be honest with you, it's pretty strongly opposed here in the United States because, you know, we've still got this, like, the mass majority of the people still have that red terror type of propaganda built into them where they're like scared of anything that's even slightly resembles the promises of the failed Soviet Union, which wasn't at all what we say it is through our propaganda. But if you don't find a way to try to create that way to catch the fallen, if you will, then we're going to end up with a lot of bigger, heavier problems. And honestly, there are people like, you know, there are progressives like Jill Stein. Even I think Bernie Sanders may have talked about it. I'm not necessarily a Bernie follower, but you know, he's just a mainstream figure that has spoken on it. I think it could be. There's a possibility that your theory would be there, but I feel like if anybody's going to force this to happen, it's not going to be the military at all. It's going to be the people that are being displaced.
The military will force to other countries, not to USA. The USA will, you know, as the system is giving some people,
guys,
so just prevent revolt. That's all I want.
Guys, thank you for the discussion of UBI. I didn't know many people are so interested in economics. Well, as far as from how we see the economics, we consider costs. So we have to consider costs without UBI, the cost of injustice, the cost of people who don't have a job, the cost of people who have a welfare compare with UBI. So they have done experiment in Finland and the Netherlands, and it's apparently quite successful. So I would say probably to some extent UBI can eliminate poverty and inequality, but for the war, I haven't seen any evidence that UBI can eliminate the war because we still have the money, so they still need money to make profit. So yeah, if I have a chance, I will give a presentation for UBI. I will talk about it with Charlotte later. So I'd like to move on to next comment. So who wants to give a comment of Andrew's presentation or any questions to Andrew? Please let me know. Anyone? No? So any comments of the presentation today? Right.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was an amazing presentation.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I have a question, Andrew. Can you send me the PowerPoint that I can upload that as well? So people that don't want to watch the whole meeting, they can take a look at the presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep. Who have some comments? Any comments of the presentation today, or any questions to Andrew?
No questions. I understood everything you're talking about, you know, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and you're a great speaker, and you're going to be, you know, you're so great for this movement. So,
well, I really appreciate that, and yeah, while I'll probably be attending the meetings with you guys, tomorrow starts my first day back in college, so it's going to be pretty hectic for me. Although I think I made mention on Facebook that I was considering either going part-time or taking the semester off, I made the smart move of enrolling full-time. So I might be especially stressed out. But I love all of you guys, and I hope that I will be a part of every meeting that is to come. Oh, thank you for your heart there.
Thank you. Anyone has any comments or questions?
We could go on to the practical matters since it's already 9:30 now. So
because we start meeting 10 minutes later. That's why. Yep.
Stephanie, did you have any questions?
I have some comments actually. So I would like to say it's a really good presentation. It's at least I understood everything this time. So
I wanted to add some more humor. I wanted humor, but I just couldn't get it crammed in there in time.
Right. All right. So at one of the slides, you mentioned overall satisfaction data, the rate. That's something I want to say because people like data, it's so easy to be manipulated. So when we look at the data, we don't think how they get this data, what the questionnaire look like, how they define satisfaction. Like they don't say, like for me, satisfaction means you must be so happy of what you're doing. You feel a sense of achievement. That's for me, but for them, probably just like as long as this guy they don't suicide, they're satisfied with it. I mean, I don't know because they don't give us any, right explanation on it. So we have to be really careful when we look at the data. I know it looks really good, something like 80%. It looks
88%
good.
88% was the second study.
Yeah, but when we break it down, we have to ask, what does it mean? So
exactly. Yeah, see, I try to sneak that in there. And it was not just about the statistic itself, but also trying to encourage individuals to read into the finer details of what study really encompassed and the way they gathered their data. All of those types of things can really influence outcomes. I mean, like you could probably just tweak that one statistic or that one study I showed you that it said 88% of people were happy with their jobs. You could probably like tweak 2 words in the ways that they gathered that data, and then you could turn up with a number like 98% of the people are happy with their jobs. You know, it's crazy that language is it's just that much of a big deal, and that people can just swap out one little word. And it's like when I was talking about the partially satisfied people, I mean, like if I told somebody, like if somebody was like, hey, do you like your job? All right, well, subtract my actual job now, because I do like my job that I have currently. But if I was at my last job, depending on who asked me too, because if it was like my you have to ask like who did the questioning. If it was my boss that asked me, I would probably have to lie to him and be like, yeah, I don't have any problems with this job. I think it's good. I like the people I work with. If it was like a person that wasn't going to disclose my name and it was off the record, like my name was off the record, I'd probably be like, yeah, my last job, it was horrible. And then that could go into, you know, like a week-long rant about everything I hated about it, and I'd end up on the opposite side of the spectrum. So when you use, like, are you overall happy? Like, is your overall happiness there? And people just, it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess I make money. I guess I'm, you know, I'm all right. And then they fall in the positive. So, yeah, always read the finer details. That's kind of how I tell, you know, I talk to you guys about just a general conversation. Always seek the finer details about why something is the way it is, or if they're, you know, what the details are. That's all.
Yep.
Any other comments? Did you have anything else?
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned like automation will take all of our jobs, which I kind of agree. We have this kind of agreement, how's the argument in economics area, and well, there's also often some argument like automation will take some jobs, but they will create new jobs. That's what they believe, which I don't quite understand. I don't know what kind of a new job they will create.
Yeah, that's commonly referred to as the Luddite fallacy, which is where people say that when automation comes in, it is going to create more jobs. And to be honest with you, based on the statistics that I showed you, the Luddite fallacy is within itself a fallacy. So I usually quote it as the Luddite fallacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they argue back in some essays or some journals. I mean, it's valid within the economic area, but honestly, as a human being, I don't think it's good. Eric, did you just raise your hand?
Yes.
Hey, sorry. Let me say one thing just to close out the last thing Stephanie mentioned about the creation of new jobs when automation comes into play. I usually, when I talk to people to use that argument, I usually break it down into like a really simple thing. And I'm like, okay, so McDonald's, right? McDonald's wants to automate a store, and right now they've got 25 employees, most of which are part-time, so they don't have to pay them insurance because they're trying to cut all the costs, right? Well, when you bring up like cutting costs and stuff, they're like, yeah, it totally makes sense. You know, they want to bring their hours down. They don't owe them any health insurance, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Well, when you consider those types of cuts, or you get it as somebody you're talking to consider those types of cuts, you're like, well, if a place like McDonald's decided to, say, automate their whole process, they got a burger flipping machine, they got a bun slapping machine, they got a cheese laying machine, whatever you want to call it, you know. The thing is, they're still operating under the same pretense, and that's to maximize profit upon final sale. Or to decrease the amount of money in production and then maximize the amount of money they make on the sale and after production is complete. So when they're like, well, it'll create more jobs, you know, it's going to create, you know, when they take away 25 part-time jobs, or, you know, 22 part-time jobs and 3 full-time jobs because there's some managers in there on salary, then they're going to replace them with technicians, and that, you know, those people that lose their jobs will go to college, and then they'll get a job that pays them like twice as much. And I'm like, you still don't, you're not thinking about the operating principle. If they're automating everything in that store and removing all of the human labor, that means it costs them less to do that. It wouldn't make sense for a company as large as McDonald's to automate it and it costs more. So they're going to want to put durable machines in there that don't require that much maintenance, and they're going to want ones that have easily exchangeable parts so that they don't have to pay some super specialized technician to come in there once every 2 hours to make sure everything's functioning. They're going to want it as hands-free of human labor as completely possible. So that's where I go with that argument every time somebody tries to bring out the Luddite fallacy on me. But yeah, go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. No, I appreciate it. I'm going to talk about my personal experience. I work in the park services. I'm a maintenance technician. And a lot of work we do, I couldn't really see being automated per se. Like, we have aspects where we have to fix the plumbing. This last week, we've been using a wood chipper. So we do use automation. But we still have to use the bucket truck to go up there with the chainsaw, cut down a tree branch, bring it down and ship it. And I really, really enjoy my job. But there's some aspects, of course, that I'm dissatisfied with. For example, one of the tree limbs we cut down, there was a bird nesting in it, and it was crushed, unfortunately. So I was like, ugh, you know, as an animal appreciator. But and also there was a nest of slugs in the portion. So it's like, that's a little off the topic. But some fields are going to be more hard to automate than others. Yeah. You're going to see probably a lot more people flood into those fields. So.
Which is now, primarily service sector, which is where almost everybody is now.
Yeah, most people have gone that way. Now, those goober international, multi-international corporations like McDonald's, yeah, they're going to face that automation thing. But at a certain point, if they're not employing anybody, are people going to really want to buy food from there? The only thing that would make it more appealing is if they created substance in it to make it more addicting, like SMG or MSG or whatever.
MSG, monosodium glutamate.
Yep.
Yeah, I know all about that stuff. Now, there is some. I think there is some kind of like technophobes out there that probably wouldn't. I think there are a lot of people who actually find it more appealing. Unfortunately, primarily caused because of their antisocial. Like the United States is becoming increasingly more antisocial. I would kind of blame all of the limitless things cell phones can do to some degree, but that's another topic for another time. I don't believe that all jobs can be automated. I don't think it's possible. Because, I mean, sure, there are even some machines that can repair themselves, but this just, I don't know, well, at least from our current understanding of what automation and mechanization can do, I don't think it's possible yet, anytime yet. There are some like crazy cool opportunities that were missed, like the computer chips that can self-repair and stuff like that. You look into that; that's incredible stuff. But I definitely expect, to some degree, that we're still going to have to do some labor. And I think that, talking about the unemployment rate of 10 to 20 being enough to destabilize an entire region's market, you have to think that, like, if we manage to even effectively eliminate 50% of the jobs, there's probably going to have to be like a community sharing or something like that, because we don't want to create like an underclass that does all the work and then everybody else, has to or gets all of the crazy cool things about it. It's a huge thing culturally that has to happen first, which is why movements like the Zeitgeist movement and TVP and a lot of them, they don't necessarily seek political action. They do more of just educating people, because that's really where the battle is right now, in my personal opinion. We have the technology. We've had the technology, I would say, comfortably since like between the 50s and 70s. Some people might say we've had it since before then, but there's a culture lag. The culture lag's got to catch up to the technological state. And if we try to implement a resource-based economy now, or we can have some transition ideas that might help shape societal behavior and to being more accepting of things like a resource-based economy. But if we try to just flip a switch now, it would be absolutely disastrous.
I do have something.
My personal opinion, anyways. But
that's a valid point. I think one thing I've experienced a lot is there is definitely a group of folks that they wouldn't want to give up labor. They enjoy having a trade skill and using their time, and it's like workaholics. I know quite a few workaholics, and I think that's one of the disappealing things is like, what would we do?
Oh, yeah. See, I had that a nice conversation, a long conversation over a cup of coffee with somebody calling themselves an anarcho-capitalist about like, oh, you take away everybody's jobs, what are we going to do? And I think Jacques Fresco talks about, they think that we're going to be like lazy and lay around in the sun and just eat and get fat. No, absolutely not. The point, in my personal, I don't know if everybody here will agree with me, but this is what I've always told people. We're not trying to eliminate your ability to do things for yourself. I think, based off all of the data and the information, all the videos, lectures that I've participated in, we are just trying to make working for a living obsolete. You can still like go out there and make a wooden chair, or you can, you know, craft things of that nature, but it's not necessary for you to do. If you love doing it and you're obviously like not destroying the environment by doing so, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But the idea is to put the importance on the utility of things that we all need, like, you know, chairs, tables, a place to live, automobiles, that we only use for a tiny fraction of the day. We place the importance on the utility rather than the ownership. And then, of course, if you still, like, you know, I work with wood. I've got a wood carving set, and I got some practice blocks and stuff like that. I go out there and I chisel and stuff like that. There's nothing is going to stop you in a resource-based economy from being able to still participate in all the things you find you're passionate about, you know. So
Yeah.
I hope that answered that.
Yeah. Right on.
Okay, thank you for sharing all your experience. It's really good to know it. So I'm gonna take the last comment. No, any last comment for today's meeting?
I haven't heard from Leo.
Leo, you've been really quiet today.
He's just kind of chilling.
Yeah.
He's got bedhead. You talking, Leo?
Leo,
See
we
your mouth
can't
moving, but I don't hear you.
Do you hear me?
Barely.
Not clear.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I have to get my mic. Yeah. Is it better?
Yep.
Much better.
I've been quiet, but it's really just about being in accord that everything has been said. So.
Oh, okay. It's always good to hear from people who were here that I was thorough and I didn't confuse anybody.
Yeah, it's really good. So sorry, I did 7 minutes past. So I would like to close the meeting for today. The next meeting will be on 3rd of September, and the topic will be cryptocurrency, something like Bitcoin. Raul and Raul and Chris will be our presenter. So I would like to thank Andrew for his outstanding presentation today, and I would like to thank all of you on the meeting. I'm looking forward to next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Very cool.
Good day, everyone.